All right, for those of you who don't know me, I am Shawn Clankie, and I am going to be talking about the following topic. Okay. Okay. I like to use 2 pens. Okay, the first two are prescriptivism and descriptivism. Grammaticality, acceptability, language education, and Japan. Okay? Now I've got them in 3 pairs, but that don't mean that they necessarily go together. Okay? But for the purposes of a nice title and a nice presentation, we're putting them together. Okay? In linguistics, grammaticality, acceptability, very common terms. In language teaching, some versions of language teaching, prescriptivism and descriptivism are very common terms. Rarely are they actually talked about together. Okay? And language education in Japan, we're here. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay? So basically the format of my presentation is going to be like this. I'm going to talk about these, I'm going to define each of them, and as we go through them we're going to talk about how they work a little bit. And then we're going to talk about language education in Japan. I'm going to show you basically where the traditional methods used in Japan and the traditional teaching styles in Japan fit on this sort of spectrum, and where the, more often than not, the communicative language teachers, often the non-Japanese teachers, end up on the spectrum and where they differ and why that is. Okay? And that's sort of going to be it for today. All right? This should take less than an hour. I expect it to take less than an hour. When we're finished, we'll go through for questions, and then I'll tell you about the next speaker next week. Okay? I'll try to not go too fast through this stuff, and I'll try to keep it as interesting as possible. All right, let's get to it. Okay. All right, prescriptivism and descriptivism. Prescriptivism is often defined, and I'm going to paraphrase these things today. Prescriptivism is often defined as the way that we are supposed to use the language, okay, according to the rules. All right, does that make sense? Traditional grammar. Okay, people were often prescriptivists, grammar teachers. Your elementary school grammar teacher, you must do this, you must do this. Okay, I can remember as a child being told, we're not supposed to use ain't. We're not supposed to do double negatives. Okay, stuff like that. Okay, so grammar teachers, language academies, okay, language academies, what I mean is like in France, okay, France has a nice language academy. They like to put lots of rules on different things that maybe they might not want to do. Iceland also has had a language academy before, and some other places like that. Okay, we often call these the language police. Okay, these are the people that you see writing letters to the editors of the newspapers saying, "Oh, our language is falling apart." Why is it falling apart? Well, because people are misusing it. Okay, I have a little trouble with that because I have trouble finding sometimes, what does it mean they're misusing the language? Certainly they're using the language, but are they misusing it? It always brings up an interesting question in my mind. Okay, so we've got the grammar teachers, we've got the language academies, we've got the language police. The so-called language police. Okay. And I'm sure learning your own language as a child, your teachers were often saying, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Okay? Even though sometimes in your mind, when you go home, you hear people do it. Okay? So, prescriptivism is, let's fix that. Using the language, how we are supposed to use the language according to the rules. Okay. Now, this always brings up the interesting question, who makes the rules? Who makes the rules? Language academies? Ministry of Education? Who should decide? All right? Think about that a little bit. Who should decide? Keep in mind, just for fun, language academies are often made up of people of, let's say, a lot of experience. They're not necessarily the people that are out in society every day actually using the language. People making the rules. Descriptivism. Contrasting this with prescriptivism. Okay? This is how we are supposed to use the language. If this is how we are supposed to use the language, then what's this?
How we use it.
How we actually use the language. Okay? Descriptivism. What people really do with the language. Okay. Can everybody see the writing on the board? It's okay? Yeah? All right. So this is how we're supposed to use the language according to the rules. This is what people actually do with the language. Okay. Easy enough. Right? Which one's right? Oh. Maybe. Brings up an interesting question. Which one's right? All right. I've had years and years of experience with grammar teachers telling me that this side is right. Intuitively, I know this side is right. All right? By nature, I'm a descriptivist. I'm interested in what people do with the language. I'm less concerned about what the rules say they're supposed to do with the language. All right? I want to know what they actually do. But I liked playing on this side a little bit. But this is the side that's more fun. Okay?
I think it shows how you're educated, and it also defines you as the part of which society you are.
How so?
Like, if you don't know the rules, you just probably make mistakes.
Sure.
And nobody can understand.
Sure. Okay. The people on this side certainly recognize the importance of grammar, but not the importance of grammar alone. The importance of grammar and its use. Okay. And we'll get to that a little bit later when I talk about Del Hymes a little bit. Okay. So, you have to ask the question, which one is right? Well, it depends on what the focus is of what it is that you're doing. Okay? Now, okay. Love these double blackboards. Okay. All right, this is prescriptivism and descriptivism. We sometimes talk about this in language teaching. I wish it were addressed in the teacher training programs here in Japan. It is clearly not. Okay? Why do I know this? Okay? Because often I will have professors come to my office and they'll ask me a grammar question. And they'll say to me, my grammar book says this is correct. Or my dictionary says this is correct. And I'll say, no. Your grammar book may say it's correct, but nobody would ever do that. No one would ever say that. Okay? And they often want to teach it that way. They teach it on the basis of that, rather than on the basis of asking a native speaker, for example, what would be appropriate here in this situation. Okay? Let me bring up grammaticality and acceptability. Okay? This goes back to Chomsky in 1957. Some of you who have taken my classes before know that I've talked about syntactic structures. And the way that I look at this is that Chomsky was pointing out a couple of very interesting things. Let me tell you what they are first, and then I'll tell you what it is. Okay. Grammaticality and acceptability. Okay. How do I want to explain this? Okay. All right. On this side, we're on the grammar side. On this side, we're on whether it's acceptable or not. This is sort of the semantic side. Chomsky used a sentence, and the sentence was this. Sit and think about this sentence for a minute. Okay, think about this for a minute. Just look at it for a minute. Okay. Good sentence? Bad sentence? What do you think of this sentence?
Weird.
Why?
It's grammatically correct, but not syntactical.
No, that's not quite right. You got part of it. It's grammatically correct. The grammar's right. The structure's right. What's wrong with it?
It's like used in tones.
Huh?
Like color and less green. So it's like nice and tones.
Anyone else?
It's a contradiction there.
Why?
Because green has a color, but it says like colorless green.
All right. Okay.
And
All right.
So it's sleep and not
Yeah.
other periods.
Okay, so furiously.
Well, sure. I mean, you could sit here and work this sentence through your head, and you could probably, at some level, find some kind of meaning to it. But Chomsky used this to demonstrate that you could have a grammatically correct sentence, a grammatically accurate sentence. The grammar's right. You have a subject, a verb, it's an adverb in here, everything's right. Colors, green, ideas, subject, verb. It works. But it's unacceptable. It's not acceptable. Okay? Why? It's essentially meaningless. Okay. Now, some arguments would say that, Chomsky's main thing was showing the differences between grammar and the semantics. It's fine. I'm applying it here to language teaching.